With just over 4 hours to go to Prime Minister's questions, there are growing calls, continuing to grow as the hours tick by, for Boris Johnson to leave office, to resign, if he's found to have attended a lockdown-breaking party at Number 10 in May 2020.
Well, the Prime Minister has so far not given a direct response to the latest allegations and yesterday avoided an appearance in the House of Commons. Today, he can no longer hide in a fridge or wherever else he might be because he's due to face opposition MPs at Prime Minister's questions. Joining us now, the Deputy Labour Leader Angela Rayner. You've taken him on before. Are you taking him on today, or is Sir Keir Starmer out of isolation?
Well, hopefully Susanna Keir will get a negative test result this morning and will be able to be at Prime Minister's questions, and I'll be by his side to see what Boris Johnson says. But the frustration is that, you know, we've had this for a couple of days now where Boris Johnson could have been very simply yes or no, was you at this party during lockdown?
You've called for his resignation. Sir Keir Starmer hasn't called for his resignation. Does that imply that maybe Sir Keir feels that he'd rather Boris stayed where he was? He's more useful to you as a party in post.
Well, it'll come of no surprise that Sir Keir Starmer doesn't think that Boris Johnson should be Prime Minister and that he thinks that he'd do a better job, and I think the same. But actually now, fundamentally, I think the British public are now starting to see that Boris Johnson is not fit to be Prime Minister. He can't answer a simple question of was you at this party at your residence or not during lockdown when people weren't able to see their loved ones who were dying. It's pretty despicable that he's treated the British public with contempt by not answering that question and trying to hide behind Sue Gray's investigation. This allegation's very serious for the Prime Minister. It's a very simple question, was you there or not? And if he was there, then his position's untenable.
Angela Rayner, I'm really confused, and I don't know whether you share my confusion about the reluctance of the Metropolitan Police to get involved up until now. Can you understand their argument that they haven't wanted to investigate breaches retrospectively?
No, I think that if somebody's broke the law, then nobody's above the law. And I think that, you know, I've called before for if the evidence is there, then from Sue Gray's inquiry, then that needs to be handed over to the Met Police, and the Met Police should deal with it as they would do anyone else who was found guilty of breaking the law at the time. I think it sends a very clear message. We cannot have a situation where the British public think it's one rule for them and one rule for the Prime Minister and government.
And I think that's exactly what the British public think, but they must also think, well, hang on a moment, they didn't have some internal inquiry from someone in their office or their home, which then had to hand over any evidence to the Metropolitan Police. When a crime or a breach of the law is investigated, you don't say, oh, we're just doing a little inquiry into whether I broke the law. The police swoop immediately. I mean, that's one of the laws that appears to be, or one of the rules that appears to be breached here, that the Metropolitan Police are dealing with it differently.
Well, I'm very clear that, you know, if the Metropolitan Police have those complaints, and they do have complaints regarding breaking of the law in Downing Street, then that should be investigated. But the Prime Minister could clear this up very quickly by answering the simple question, was he at a party in Number 10 during lockdown, yes or no? And he should then do the honourable thing. He shouldn't be waiting until the Met Police bang on his door. It's pretty simple. Did you do it? Yes or no? If you did it, then you shouldn't be in your job.
Well, presumably that's going to be your tactic or Sir Keir's tactic at Prime Minister's questions at 12 o'clock. Presumably your attack is going to be very, very simple. You're simply going to stand there and whatever he says, if he doesn't give you a direct answer, you're simply going to repeat the question. Are those going to be your tactics? Simply to keep saying, were you there? Were you there? Were you there?
I mean, the Prime Minister shouldn't be waiting till Prime Minister's questions. He could pick up the phone right now and speak to your programme and say yes or no to the British public. You know, was you there, was you not? But the frustration for me is I took Prime Minister's questions last week and the Prime Minister lied 4 times. And, you know, it's very frustrating because not only is it frustrating for the public to see that, but it undermines our democratic process and it makes people feel that they've got no confidence in politicians and what we do, whereas a vast majority of politicians are good public servants and do want to do the best by their constituents. But where you've got a Prime Minister who flagrantly disregards the truth, doesn't follow the rules, then that really does damage everybody, including our democracy. And that's the frustration for me. The Prime Minister can clear this up very quickly and by answering yes or no, was he there?
For the sake of argument, let's hypothesise. Let's say that he either makes a statement before PMQs or in response to the question, he says, yes, I've looked at my diary, I was there, I'm terribly sorry. It was a huge error of judgment. And he does a full mea culpa. Let's say he does that, and some people are suggesting that that's his only option, really. What happens then?
Well, I think that people who are still grieving their loved ones, who were not able to say goodbye to them properly, people who had sacrificed so much at that time, will say that sorry is not good enough. You know, the Prime Minister's had plenty of opportunities now to come clean about what happened, and these latest allegations are that the Prime Minister was actually at the party rather than, you know, parties that were going on, and he claims he knew nothing about them. So these are very serious allegations against the Prime Minister, and if he was there and if he did break the rules, then his position is untenable.
All right, Angela Rayner, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, we await to see whether it's you or your boss who puts those questions to the Prime Minister, but Prime Minister's questions will be at midday. Thank you very much indeed.